And Richard Earl, very good. Yeah, we'll get underway. So great to see everyone this morning here. I woke up and wondered whether the rain would really hold off or not, and no, here it comes. But again, a wonderful little bit of Chico weather, some April showers that will keep things green and the flowers blooming, and April showers bring May flowers, the old saying, and I think probably some truth to it. Great to see everyone. I want to thank Betty Noble for making those cookies and those muffins there and getting our table set up with coffee, and I am interested if anyone here knows about the donut people and Bob and what happened. We haven't seen him for a while, and I'm wondering what happened to him. I hope he's all right. So, I do want to mention this is our 4th program here in our spring lecture series, and the next one, I believe it's May 3rd, I believe, and that will feature me. Dave Noble will give a program on something near and dear to me since I was, even before I can remember, I'm sure I was at the Boy Scout camp at Chico Meadows Camp Lassen. Because my dad had been a young man in 1934-35 when that camp was built, and he had been involved with the building of that new Boy Scout camp at Camp Lassen. And so that was always one of his most treasured life memories there, the days in the mountains that he spent. And so again, we often would visit there. And so my program in early May will be really about that camp, about Chico Boy Scouting. I went through a long Boy Scouting experience myself, so I'll be showing pictures from my dad's collection, old pictures and newer pictures. And of course this all has surfaced. One last thing here, I don't know how many of you are aware of this Boy Scout camp at Chico Meadows. If we were to go just over here to Chico Creek, probably 100 yards over here, and start upstream, we come to Chico Meadows. Not Butte Meadows, Chico Meadows. They're just about a mile away. Butte and Chico Meadows right there at the Butte Meadows location. And there is where the Boy Scout camp is located. And this is really one of the most historic buildings in Butte County. It's going to be celebrating its 90th year here, I think this year. And the Lodge building is a beautiful, big building put together during the Great Depression by Depression era works programs and crews there that were hired through governmental funds to come in and build this beautiful big log lodge. And now it looks like that's going to be sold. The Boy Scouts are going through a convulsion of change, and so it looks like that camp will at least leave the Boy Scout ownership. And so again, I'm going to be talking about that. So other than that, I don't know if I have any other real news here from our museum. I'd encourage you to look at our new did you have something?
No.
No. Our new Chico State exhibit. We still think it's a good one, and just out of interest, I think this will be great. Maybe you've seen our display case back there with those really attractive Little Nell dresses from a Chico person, Judy McCrae Simmons. Well, now Judy has agreed to come in and give us a program in the fall on her experience of running for and then being selected as a Little Nell for the Old Pioneer Day celebration. So that should be fun. So let's move into our program today. And of course we have Anna Kawecka. And you can see right there, look at that name, Kawecka, right? Yeah. Again, I've been schooled a little bit in the pronunciation, and so I just took my swing at it. And she is an archivist and records analyst at our Butte County Hall of Records. And she was born in Canada, in Toronto, grew up in Toronto, and then she would come to the United States in 2020, come right here to Chico and Oroville to work at the new Hall of Records facility as a records analyst and archivist. And so I'm going to read this little blab that I cooked up for you here on that Hall of Records facility. I think it's a major step forward here for all of us, for Butte County, to have the new Hall of Records now in place. And I'm going to read this to you. And I do acknowledge Mike Magliari's information and his sending me the newspaper article when the hall itself opened. The new Butte County Hall of Records building project was underway when Anna Kawecka arrived here at that facility. And the new facility would be finished and opened in January 2016. Some 6 years later, when Candace Grubbs would retire in 2022, after serving as Butte County's clerk recorder, an elected position she filled for 36 years, the Butte County Board of Supervisors would bestow on the new building the rename of the Candace J. Grubbs Hall of Records as a tribute to her long service to Butte County. It had been her goal for years, even decades, to secure a new centralized storage facility for county records that go back to the California Gold Rush era, as Butte County was one of the original counties established in 1850 with California's statehood. The county clerk recorder is responsible for the storage and accessibility of some 122 types of records mandated for preservation and accessibility. And for decades, Butte County's records have been stored in scattered places and often difficult to access, and at times in compromising storage conditions. Grubbs would finally carry through the $9.5 million project and bring county records under one roof in a building she called the People's Building. Finally, Butte County's public records would be preserved and accessible, a cornerstone concept that underlies the very democratic governance of our country, providing the capacity to look back in time with accuracy. So with that, I'm going to turn our program over to Anna Kawecka.
Yeah,
all right.
Cuddle up to it.
Can you guys hear me fine? All right. So I'm going to start with my spiel just because it'll keep me on track and keep me grounded. My name is Anna Maria Kawecka. I'm the archivist at the Butte County Archives, located at the Hall of Records in Oroville. As Dave mentioned, I've been there since 2020, which is exactly 4 years as of this month. I handle the care, maintenance, and general functions of the Archives Division and its collections. I graduated from the University of Toronto with both a Master of Museum Studies and a Master of Information, specializing in archives and records management in 2018. And I've been working in this industry since 2016. I've consistently straddled the line between the world of museums and archives, but I've also I've always found comfort in between the stacks among the old books and artifacts. I'm a natural introvert and I've never been quite the public speaker, so please have mercy on me for the next hour or so. We're going to start with my team. The archives would be nothing without our lovely team. I'm supported by a group of 6 dedicated volunteers in the archives. They work on a multitude of projects to help digitize, transcribe, and make records accessible to researchers. Just last year, they put in a collective 1,911 hours into working in the archives.
Wow.
They're some of the most passionate and knowledgeable people I know, and are truly the beating heart of the archives. I cannot thank them enough for their hard work, and they make my job easy. They've conveniently assembled themselves all in the front row here, supporting the archives even beyond the hours that they've put in. So thank you to each and every one of you. I would get nowhere without your hard work. So what we do. I'll start with the big picture and work my way down. But the Archives Division has a very specific mission to support the Clerk Recorder's Office in fulfilling its obligation to preserve, protect, and provide access to Butte County records. Our focus is on safeguarding these vital sources of information while also working to improve and streamline accessibility. I work closely with both my volunteers and the Recorder's Department to transcribe, digitize, and modernize the availability of our records. And this is both physically and digitally. A majority of our records have been digitized and made available at the Hall of Records, and I'll further expand on this in a few minutes. So as Dave mentioned, we are located at the Hall of Records, which is an impressive state-of-the-art 35,000 square foot building, which opened in 2016. Those are generally available upon request. This means that with some materials, it may take me some time to find the records and bring them out, but that depends on where they're stored. Our research room hours are Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and you don't require an appointment to use our computers. They're free of charge, and you're more than welcome to schedule an appointment with me in case you need some extra time or you want that extra guidance, I guess. Copies of our records are also available as per our standard fees. And our computers include our collections split into 2 series of computers. This is 1850 to about 1979, and then 1980 to 2024. They're complemented by access to the assessor and tax collector lookups, as well as a county GIS computer. So in some instances, you may start from one computer and work your way to other computers, or find yourself bouncing between 2 or 3 computers. So again, these photos are a little overview of our research room and our little research space. And yeah, we have both our records and then the assessor and tax collector and county GIS to kind of complement our records and work in tandem with them. So I hope I can encourage at least a couple of you to come visit our office and become your own detectives. So now that you know where you can do your research, it's time I tell you about the vault. So our facility is a carefully monitored temperature and humidity controlled environment, kept cool and dry to preserve our materials. We like to keep it between a cool 65 degrees Fahrenheit, maxing out at about 70 degrees. When the building was planned, this room was carefully prepared to make it safe and efficient for storing our collections. The archives consists of one large storage area and workspace, as well as a smaller secure room dedicated to housing our older assessor's records. These spaces house all of our materials, meaning everything is on site with us. And this includes books, maps, boxes of papers, and everything in between. But we also digitize and film copies of our records for safekeeping and longevity. The film master copies are kept at a secure off-site facility specializing in security of highly sensitive materials. And this is done to ensure safe copies in case of disasters of any kind: fire, flood, earthquake, anything really. This also means that we have at least 2 and often 3 copies of a record, physical or analog, digital, and also film. And this is at any given time. Even our shelving is made from non-corrosive and treated materials to ensure they withstand the environment and sheer weight of knowledge that they hold. So you can be sure that we've taken all the precautions to preserve our materials. So again, these are a few photos of our storage facility, showcasing our mobile high-density storage units, which use space-saving technology to provide optimal shelving for both maximizing floor space and the efficiency of material retrieval. I also have a few of our collections visible here. The red books are a good chunk of our grantor grantee indexes. Those are mostly referring to deeds, as well as some box materials, some of our B.L. McCoy field books, and our secondary storage for our assessment rolls, which again I'll expand on in a few slides. Our storage system is a great representation of our modern and practical approach to collection management, adhering to industry standards while also being pragmatic in daily use. And this is also our map storage. So I mentioned that we have some maps in our collection. Originally, a few decades. Sorry, I'm not sure what that was. So originally, a few decades prior, most of our maps were kept in flat drawers, which you can see kind of in that top left-hand corner. Left, right for you. Which we still use for our plat maps. However, when the Hall of Records was built, we invested in these massive wall storage units. The maps are stored vertically, encapsulated in acid-free mylar sleeves, and hung on glides, which are all custom made for our space. Our maps total almost 20,000 at this point. And the bottom right-hand photo shows just how easy they kind of glide in and out. So you can access them very easily while still keeping them really safe and clean and dust-free, which is a major issue in archives, as you can imagine. Our collection. So this is just an overview of what we have, and in the next few slides, I'll elaborate on the type of records within each collection. We have a vast sea of materials, which include vital records. These are your birth, death, and marriage records. Naturalization records, which are your immigration and citizenship records. Maps, which come in a variety of recorded, plat, and historical. Property records, this is the biggest collection that we have, and just to name a couple of records are your land patents, homesteads, deeds, covenants, bills of sale. I could go on and on, that list kind of goes on forever. We also have a limited amount of assessor records, and these are assessment rolls from 1852 to about 1971. We have county clerk records, which are mostly discharges, military rolls, business and corporation partnerships, etc. We have a limited amount of court clerk records. These are mostly grand jury reports and some probate. We have election records, which mostly consist of voter registration, elected positions, and some correspondences. And lastly, we have Board of Supervisor records, which are your minutes, petitions, resolutions, correspondences, ordinances, and everything in between, up to about 2010. So I'll kind of go through each type of record and give you an overview of what we have. All right, so vital records are your birth, death, and marriage records. They are, however, restricted in access due to certain privacy laws. Therefore, you can't necessarily research them physically, but if you have an individual you're looking for, we're more than willing to look for them for you. And when we do confirm that they're there, you're able to purchase records. Naturalization records are also restricted access. They contain the declarations of intent, petitions for, and certificates of citizenship for some Butte County residents. Both of these records, or types of records, have some of the strictest regulations within our collections. So access has become more difficult than some of you might remember in the past, even researching a decade ago. However, we do our best to provide access when appropriate, and we abide by all necessary rules and guidelines provided by the state and federal government. So I'm going to move on to collections. You're more than welcome to sift through and explore as much as you like. Let's go back to maps. So like I said, we have well over 19,000 maps. I believe last time I checked was about 19,600 and change. And these grow every month, which means that every time someone comes in to record a new map or record of survey, our collection grows by that many pages. Our collection consists of our historical, recorded, and plat map collections. Each map has been carefully digitized and preserved for everyday use and conservation. So generations from now, we can still use them. Our maps range from early 1850s to 2024 and cover the expansive parcels across the county. So our historical maps contain some fascinating areas of interest, such as previously planned subdivision projects, mines, bridges, and even topographical layouts. These were never officially recorded, but were collected as historical materials, almost as you would collect drafts of an article in the writing process. They may not be legal documents, but they still contain interesting information on the county and its history, and they often precede official recorded maps. So our recorded maps are exactly what they sound like. These are official recorded maps based on surveys conducted by professional land surveyors. These are maps that reveal specific information of subdivisions and parcels of land, and they'll often include boundaries, measurements, and location of corner markers. They'll also sometimes contain other information, such as easements, right-of-ways, water sources, and wells, among other features. So I wanted to give you guys a few examples from each area of the map series. The large white map that you see is one of the earliest recorded maps of Chico, circa 1862, and I've highlighted an area of the map that might seem familiar. Is anyone willing to wager a guess as to where that is? Yeah. I figured this crowd would know the answer pretty quickly. So yeah, that's right, you're sitting on it right now, in the bottom left corner of the green highlighted square. The map to its right is a historical map, a sketch of the G&G gold mine surveyed by B.L. McCoy in 1894. And it shows all the locations of ravines, tunnels, and shafts of the mine. And below that, we have one of B.L. McCoy's field notebooks. And I'm sure most of you know, but if you don't, McCoy was the county surveyor from about 1893 to 1903. He did a ton of prominent survey work both across the county, California, and even other states. His field notes are as specific as it gets, even noting things like rattlesnake-infested fields, or the time it took to travel between survey locations on horseback. He's got some fascinating information in the margins of his work, and we have almost 140 notebooks filled to the brim with maps and notations. So, property records I mentioned a bit earlier, and these are not limited to parcels of land, or deeds for parcels of land, so to speak. Property records are the most extensive collection we care for. Our records rarely go beyond the large-scale parcels of land, but we do have some records for what went on these parcels. So most of our records will tell you about the parcel of land itself. We don't usually have many records that pertain to what's on the property. So I don't have blueprints, I don't have plans, but I can tell you who owned it throughout history. But the records that we do have that might tell you some goings-on include crop and chattel mortgages, bills of sale for business furnishings, and personal property as well. So of course you can look up deeds, mortgages, liens, leases, separate property of married women, and homesteads as well. This collection also includes mining and water claims and land patents, which are often key pieces of information for local research. Depending on how much time and energy you have to give to the research, you can really get down to the nitty-gritty details of a parcel's history. So the slide behind me contains a few great examples of property records. The large yellow paper is a notice of a mill location. This is for a mining site. The gorgeous script on the top right-hand side is that of a land patent for Rancho Esquan, and it showcases the beautiful decorative script that they used for some of the early land patents. Below that, we see a map also included in a land patent. This one is for Bosquejo Rancho, I believe, if I can read that clearly. And this was common with larger patents, showing the vast distances, terrain covered, and providing surveyed measurements for the large parcels of land. Land patents are often very thorough and descriptive, down to very small details. They'll often mention specific trees, boulders, streams, and other natural resources as markers when being surveyed. So I'm sure you can all imagine how different the land looks over 100 years later. And they can be pretty fun to read and decipher, especially now versus back then. So next to that, we have a few more notices of location and proof of labor on a few mining sites in the county. These were the title to any mining activities underground. They legitimized the mines and gave title holders the right to dig and extricate anything found on the claim. However, they had nothing to do with the land above ground. So you'd have two separate deeds essentially, or rights to what was on the ground versus what was underground. But their description can be just as fun as the land patents, often using marked trees, boulders, and riverbanks as markers. So essentially, using our records, and like I said, a good chunk of your time, you could research the history of a property back to its original land patent in the 1800s. This would give you an overview of who owned the parcel, what the parcel originally looked like, and how it changed over the course of its existence. So as I mentioned, we have a good chunk of assessors' records. This collection consists of a majority of assessment or tax rolls dating from 1852 to about 1971. They contain tax amounts for parcels of land and personal property. And these are some fun records to research and are a great resource when looking up ownership, personal property, parcel size, and property values over time. The older records especially get down to the minute details, mentioning features such as farming equipment, large household furniture and goods, such as sewing machines and pianos, and even down to the family or farm dog they owned. So this makes them a valuable resource not only in researching property, but family history as well. I've had a few researchers discover some neat features about their past relatives, finding out the industries that they worked in, the type of agriculture they took part in, and some of the businesses that they owned. We also have some older assessor parcel maps and wonderful plat maps that illustrate parcel size and ownership over time as well. These are only available between 1887 and 1927, but are another bountiful source of information. They highlight the owners at the time, acreage or size of the lots, and sometimes even include taxation rates. These are really great to track changes in parcels and ownership, as well as illustrate how towns and cities have shuffled around and transformed over time. Using these maps, you can compare a specific block or lot in Chico or Oroville or any other town of the era, and physically compare changes that happened between the 1880s and well into the 1920s. So again, I chose a map that might look familiar, now that we all know for sure that we're aware of where we are. The green box highlights the block of Chico, where we're currently at, and in that bottom left-hand corner of the box, you see the old library building, which was repurposed for this museum, and the library is listed in the box, showing its presence in 1922 when this plat map was filed. All right, county clerk records. This collection consists of fees and licenses, business and corporation partnerships, UCC filings, as well as military rolls and discharges. These records are directly created by the department in conjunction with county and state needs. Many of these records are often overlooked by the average researcher, but they contain a treasure trove of information. For example, you can find and identify early companies that came about in Butte and track their growth or name changes over time. Likewise, you can find your own or a relative's discharge paper as long as they were recorded in the county of Butte. The military rolls give us insight into locals who joined the Army, whether in active duty or not. But early records are especially interesting to some researchers, even genealogists. As I mentioned, these are often overlooked but can help support local history and development with the right dedication or stubbornness while researching. One of the books I was able to bring today is a military roll from 1915. It contains names of enrolled individuals as well as where they were from. It's located on the table, so as well as 2 other books, and you're more than welcome to flip through the pages and see if you recognize some names. On this slide, I also have a discharge for a very special military personnel, Poochie the dog. He was discharged in 1945 after serving about 2 years in the military. He was paid a good salary in bones, specified on his discharge. I regret not bringing a copy of that because that one's probably one of my favorite records. My last image on that slide is one of our articles of incorporation books showing corporation names, locations, capital stock and shares, among some other information recorded. And like I said, these complement a lot of our other records as they provide information on early businesses in Butte County and the region overall. So, Clerk of the Court. I have a small collection of materials from the courts, mostly consisting of grand jury information and a smattering of probate records. The grand jury records go back to about 1911, consisting mostly of empanelments, which were used in the process of selecting grand jury members, as well as grand jury reports from 1978 through to 2022. The probate records we have are fairly inconsistent in the years covered. They're kind of infamously Swiss cheese. I have a few pockets of records from the 1850s and a few more pockets all the way through to the 1980s. And there's not a real chronological group to those. Most of the cases seem focused on estates, wills, and inheritance taxes, but the rest of probate can be found in the courts, in their own vaults. And we only really have some of these records because previously our clerk recorder was also clerk of the courts. Elections records. So the archives don't maintain many records from the elections department. However, one of the more interesting types of records we do monitor is the voter registration. These are helpful when doing genealogy, as you can research a person's political views, as well as things like occupation, place of birth, whether they were married or not, among other things. And these are mostly that specific in the early Great Registers. The early ones contain a lot of fun details to identify voters, including moles, missing digits or limbs, and other physical features that might help identify them. And this is way before your standard photo IDs were considered. So likewise, one of the neat parts of this area of the collection is one of the infamous petitions of trying to change the county seat from Oroville to Chico. The book is from 1873 and contains all the signatures that supported the change. And this is the top left for you guys. Top left image. Under that image, we have the shelving, which contains all of our available Great Registers. Those are located in our lobby just outside the archives, so you can just come on in. While you're waiting for something else to process, you can come and see if one of your predecessors or relatives were registered to vote in Butte County. And then we have the large image, which is a peek into one of those books, showing the names, ages, and places of birth, among other information recorded. Board of Supervisors records. This collection focuses on most materials produced by the board and its functions from the 1850s to about 2010. The majority of our records consist of the volumes of minutes from board meetings, but we also have ordinances, petitions, resolutions, and other correspondences. These have proven to be a great source of information, and the longer I work with them, the more I realize the true potential they hold. Some topics include programming, which covers aid and recreation within the county, as well as road creation and abandonment, improvements, and general district management. This covers your school, irrigation, reclamation districts, among a few other things. The minutes are excellent when researching changes within the county, both big and small, and are quite specific in providing details of discussions and decisions made affecting the county and community within it. Like I said, they're very, very detailed. They'll tell you who agreed, who disagreed, whether they came back to the conclusion at a later time. And it lists all the Board of Supervisors throughout the history of the county. So as I mentioned, I learn new features every time I use them in research, and they've proven to be another treasure trove of information. I recommend to a lot of my researchers to take a look and kind of go through those books, just because oftentimes they'll contain a piece of information that they were looking for that they didn't realize the Board of Supervisors would have made a decision on. Like I said, this includes roads and district management. So lastly, we have miscellaneous records. Excuse me, and this is a little bonus category that exists in our collections. These are exactly what they sound like. A mixture of different records that were just kind of slapped together in different books. And these are the books you go to when you can't find what you're looking for. I actually have one of the indexes, the small book, on the far side of the table. And they contain everything from agreements and indentures to even a couple of free papers, which are emancipations. So on top of these books, there are also items such as books outlining early school districts and boundaries. So on my slide, I have one of those such books which talks about the school boundaries in 1920, as well as one entry from the miscellaneous books, which I believe is one of the free papers. Yes, yeah, so that's one of our emancipations that we have. That's a pretty neat record to have in California.
What's the date for that emancipation?
I'd have to double check that. I'd have to see the whole page, but you can come and check it out. All right, so I'm going to end with a quote that resonates with me as a history lover and archivist. Of all our national assets, archives are the most precious. They are the gift of one generation to another, and the extent of our care of them marks the extent of our civilization. So that quote is Arthur G. Doty, Dominion archivist. It's a little Canadian side note for everyone. It's circa 1924, so it's a little early Canada, but it still resonates with me not only as an archivist, but I guess as a Canadian archivist, even if I'm here, you know. So yeah, I'm always willing to answer questions or concerns, and you can reach me via phone or email, the latter being easier as an option, as I can be away from my desk assisting in the research room that I outlined with you guys. And you can see this slide for phone number and email. But I also have brochures here that you can take. I have one for the archives, one for the clerk recorder's department, and I have my business card in case you guys have any questions that you don't really want to ask right now, or maybe something pops up later on. And you're all welcome to take one. You can also find more information on the clerk recorder's office on our website, buttevotes.net. And I included a fun photo. This is not in our archives, unfortunately, but it is of the clerk recorder's office in about 1916. And I borrowed the image from the Marion Special Collections, which I hope they'll forgive just for today. So with that being said, I wanted to extend a massive thank you to all of you for taking time out of your day and listening to me talk at you about what the archives are all about. I wanted to leave quite a bit of time for questions or discussions in case you guys wanted to cover anything else. So if anyone has any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
I remember there was one you had limited records on certain things. I was wondering what those things were.
Limited.
One slide that had like 5 different records and a couple said limited. I didn't know what that meant.
Oh, partial. It just means that we have some of them. So for the assessors and the court clerk records, I only have some records. These don't necessarily come from our office, but they were kind of brought to us to care for them. They have historical value. They have value in property research with our records. The court records, like I said, our previous clerk recorder was also clerk of the courts, so they kind of migrated with them, I guess, in a way. Some of those pockets of court records.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sure.
I have 2 questions. On number 1, are your records accessible via the internet, online?
So you can search our records online, but you can't view anything online outside of the Board of Supervisor minutes. We do have those posted. I can give you instructions on how to do that, best through email because they are online. But mostly you can search for what we have, but to actually view books, records, maps, you'd have to come into our office or purchase copies depending on what they are.
Okay, thank you. The second question has to do with birth certificates.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have birth certificates?
Yes.
There?
Yeah, we have, as long as they were born in Butte County, we'll have a birth certificate, if they have a birth certificate. We're finding that a lot of people doing genealogy look for their relatives who were born in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and that's a kind of bumpy period in terms of birth records, just because if you were born on a farm and you died on a farm and you were buried on that same farm, oftentimes you didn't need a birth record or a death record to prove anything. It just kind of happened.
I've attempted to get 70 in Butte County.
Mm-hmm.
I can't get it. I'm told that it's not available. Check with Sacramento, and checking with Sacramento, it's not.
There are instances where records are sealed, and that depends on the circumstances, but I'd reach out to the clerk recorders. When was the last time you did this? A couple of years ago, or was it recent?
It would have been maybe 6-7 months ago.
I'm not sure. Shoot me an email and we'll see what I can, if I can look for it and see, give you a better answer maybe. Yeah. But Sacramento is the place. So if we don't have a copy, your next best bet is Sacramento. They have everything.
Do you have a contact number or something for the Sacramento group?
No, unfortunately not. Their offices are so expansive and they kind of have changes happening so often. Usually if you look up their either public health or vital record services, they usually have an up-to-date phone number or email that you can reach them at.
Okay, thank you.
First of all, I had my first encounter with the Hall of Records 2 days ago, and Anna is incredibly helpful.
Oh, thank you.
The question is, I think I heard you say that you have maps of even projects that never went forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so our historical collection it has physical maps that weren't officially recorded. So in some cases it was subdivisions or maps that weren't officially maybe, considered illegal or considered, I don't know, the final draft. But yeah, there's some interesting stuff in there. It's kind of all over the place and a little bit of everything, but there's some treasures in there that you can definitely explore. So you're welcome back to come check them out.
I was interested in if you know of any concentrated bits of Native American statistics information in the county records. Are they separated out or just part of?
Yeah, those, from my knowledge, are separate depending on the tribal organization.
Separate from county records or separate from the records you have?
Separate from at least the records that I have. So even, some of our maps or even on the GIS, you'll just kind of have a piece of land and that will be ownership of them, that tribal organization, but not necessarily have any other records.
I'm not necessarily looking for an organization, I'm looking for individual people back in the 1800s.
Individual people could, yes, they could absolutely exist. You just have to search them by name, yeah. But it doesn't necessarily lay out that they are part of, the indigenous community.
Or
It's
doesn't identify.
not a lot of, not most records, yeah.
How do you get the records? Is every department obligated to send records to you? How do they come to you?
So we have recorded documents. That means that somebody or another department has to come in and record the record. So we have no control over who kind of comes or has to come to record things. For example, if you own a property with another person and they pass away, it's your responsibility to record an affidavit of death to remove them from the title. But we kind of have no control or no ability to track that many people to ensure that things are recorded. But if they are recorded, we have a copy.
Okay, so it's recorded information.
Yes. Yes.
No, who was the building architect and where were they based?
Ooh, I don't have that information off the top of my head. I could get that information, probably off the plans of the building.
Nice looking building.
Well, a few years ago, we heard that there was a board of supervisors. No, it wasn't called board of supervisors. I can't remember. It went missing. Has it been returned?
There is one book that's quite a mystery. This has been decades long of a mystery. We're not sure where that book is. We're not even sure what is completely in that book. That was prior, like long prior to...
It wasn't called board of supervisors. It was called something else.
It's the infamous book A. It's kind of a mystery that has preceded me, my predecessor. It's still to this day, it kind of haunts everyone that's ever been in this position because we're asked every so often.
County record book, isn't it?
It's an early book, but I've never seen the book, nor is there any digital copy of that book or filmed copy of that book. I've done my digging to try and find that book. My predecessor did digging, and yeah, we haven't ever been able to identify where that book went. And I'm hoping, by some miracle, someday it shows up.
At one time, I believe, and I could be wrong, so I apologize to the association. I thought in the basement of the Chico Museum at one time, they had quite a few official records only because now I'm telling my age. Only because the archival legal requirements of the county weren't in place yet.
That's possible.
Oh, you don't know if those have come over or?
Everything, my understanding, because this was a bit before my time, my understanding that everything did make its way back. The only place that there might be some secondary items is special collections. And I've yet to kind of create that line of communication to make sure what they have versus what we have. That's a project that I will be on sometime soon, hopefully. But yeah, from my understanding, the books were spread out throughout the county, kind of in Chico and Oroville, in different places, and eventually they were brought back once we had a warehouse in place to store that many materials. Now, everything that was stored there and in the old building at 25 County Center Drive where the assessor and tax collector are still at, those are now on site with me. So I have 2 spaces where I have storage for those, and they're kept cool, dry, and monitored very closely. Yes?
I had several analog cassette tapes as Butte County people I've interviewed, and I'd like to have them digitized. And if I brought in some, how would you decide which ones you would accept? And would you be able to make a copy for your collection and that I would have for my collection?
So unfortunately, that type of record wouldn't suit our our collections. I would recommend you reach out to the local historical societies or maybe genealogical societies and see who would be interested in that. There are companies that can create digital copies of analog tapes. I know there's several in Sacramento. There might be some in Chico. I'm not sure though. Things have kind of changed in the couple of last few years. That's a business that's kind of slowly, unfortunately, fading out due to the lack of people that even know how to use those types of machines. So I definitely recommend reaching out to the historical societies because...
For example, if I interviewed L.L. McCoy and I had an interview of him, would that not be something that you would like to have? He's a surveyor, Butte County.
I understand that, yes.
What do you do with that?
I'm not certain. I'd still say that that would be a historical society item because it's not a direct product of the county. It's an interview of him as an individual, and although he is significant to the county, that material doesn't necessarily cover things that are his work, that we are directly kind of holding in our collection. So although I might want a copy of that, I don't know if I would want the original copy just because I think the historical societies might do more good with it. They might be able to be used better by members of the community.
You're saying historical societies. Thank you very much. And then about legal court trials, how about jury trial transcripts? Do you have any of those?
No, that's the courts, and they have their own vault that my current understanding is they're in the process of digitizing. So you might want to reach out to them if you want any transcripts.
When you talk about trial jury, that's the court, the Superior Court?
Yes.
Is that the one over on off of 20th?
So there's one in Chico and one in Oroville. I'm not quite certain where their vault is and where their older records are. I would reach out to them because they're an entirely different department and they care for their records however they care for the records.
So a diary, what about personal diaries?
Same, I would say historical society.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Anybody else?
What is the role of your board that you have? Your board of directors or whatever they were?
You mean the board of supervisors?
No, the ladies that you introduced at the beginning. What do they do?
These are my volunteers.
Oh.
Yeah. Sorry. I was bored. Yeah, all these lovely people volunteer multiple hours of their week to the archives, and like I said, I wouldn't get anything done without them, and they're making it much easier to access those records right now. Yeah.
I just Googled the Hall of Records building. It was designed by Russell Galloway and Associates.
There you go. Thank you. You have another question?
I didn't get you mentioned some dates that the plat maps. Is it 1880s to 1927?
1887 to 1927.
87.
Yeah, we only cover a very small amount. The rest are with the assessor.
You mean previous to 87?
No, after.
Oh, so
1927.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes?
I have a question. I was looking at an old homestead record, but it was through the BLM survey. Would your records be different, or would they be pretty much the same?
It would be the same thing. Oftentimes, a record was also sent to the Bureau of Land Management. So they often have a copy of a land patent or a homestead record because that altered the status of the property. So the land patent is the first deed that goes from the government to a person or entity, institution, and then any deed after that is just considered a grant deed. But the homestead would be a change of status. It's more of legal status, not necessarily like a lot of people when they think homestead, they think like pioneer days, covered wagons and such. That was a legal status due to the Homestead Act of 1862, 72. There you go, thank you. Yeah, so, but they would have the same language, possibly just on a different physical paper. But you can still get the copy in our office as well as BLM. Yeah. Another one?
One other quick question. What about, you mentioned the mining claims. Is that all digitized? Would it be able to, like, to search for, I've seen old records, newspaper records, where they'll mention a specific mine name.
Yes.
By Native Americans, for example.
Yeah, so those mining claims or water claims can be found in our office. You're not able to view any records online, at least at this point in time, but they are digitized to an extent, so you can view them on the computer in our office or in the books that they're located.
You said something about after 1927, the assessor keeps their own records. So at what point do they come to you to be archived? That's 100 years ago.
They don't. They don't.
Won't ever.
So we only have that group of records from them just because they wanted them to be stored. My understanding is that they wanted them to be stored in a secure environment. We don't normally take everybody's records. But they do complement our deeds and our maps, so they're kind of in conjunction with what we already have, so that's why they were accepted as a kind of pseudo donation in a way. Anyone else?
So there are multiple archives in the county. There's your archive, there's the assessor's archives, there's the court archives. Are there another archive? That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
It quite depends on the department. Our archives serve the clerk recorder's office.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you keep the census information? What, 1860?
No, we don't have census information, but you can access them on websites like Family Search or through the National Archives, I believe.
Who keeps the census information?
The National Archives.
Well, I was out with Paul and Sandy on Thursday, and so we had a wonderful, she is really great. So I recommend, she will help you, and she's really fast. But you mentioned the GIS, we didn't even touch on that one.
Yeah, so
when we were there, is it available online?
Yeah, so the county GIS is available through the assessor's website. It's a tool I recommend when somebody doesn't know the specific address of a property, or maybe they're trying to look into an easement with a neighbor and they're not sure which neighbor. The GIS, like I said, you can go onto the website, the assessor's website, and there's buttons on their page that you can access and view maps. That'll take you to something that looks a lot like Google Maps. However, they have a lot of neat tools. You can select parcels, you can search for a parcel by address or APN, that's assessor parcel number. But you can also measure. There's different types of maps you can layer, so you can view streets, you can view topography in some cases. I think they even have deer herd populations on there. So it's a really neat tool. It has nothing to do with our department. However, I just try and push those types of tools out to people because it is free and it's available, and you know, you never know what it can help with. So yeah.
What's the GIS?
All right.
Good job, Anna.
Thank you, everyone.